We've been here for 21 years now. The area we came from was about an hour north of New York City. It wasn't as different for us as people might imagine. In fact, it's somewhat amusing that we'd actually never lived closer to a shop because Castlepoint's got a little store. We'd actually never been on public sewerage. We'd actually never had streetlights outside of our house. So in some respects, coming to Castlepoint was more urban than where we came from in New York State, and now we're out of New York City. When we first came, that first month we were here, it was just incredibly windy because it was just sort of during the equinox, which is when the winds are always strongest. We weren't quite sure what we'd run into at that point. One of the conventionally cultivated paddocks was getting regrassed. About a third of the paddock, all the seed got blown out to sea. And we weren't very impressed with that and re-sowed it. And about a third of that got blown out. So we re-sowed it, finally got everything in, but we decided there actually had to be a much better way of regrassing than full conventional cultivation. Being summer dry and having a high wind run through the spring means that we don't necessarily do things traditionally. What we found with traditional plowing is you're really opening the soil up, and if you've got a lot of wind blowing, then your topsoil is getting blown out to sea, which doesn't do anybody any good. And so that's why we've actually settled on direct drilling for establishing as much as we can. And that leaves the soil intact, so even when it's windy, it doesn't blow away. And we find even after forage crops like rape or kale, which we'll use as a winter crop, when that gets grazed off, there is a fair bit of open dirt, but because it's all compacted and the roots are still there to hold it, it doesn't really blow away. And you can see the difference in the paddock. You may have some open ground, but it's not dusty. Whereas on the farm tracks or stuff, you'll see dust blowing all over the place. We do about 1,000 to 1,500 poplar and willow poles every year. The point of that is to stabilize the slopes. The hills here are quite prone to slips, and the deep roots of the poplars as they spread out help keep the hills from slipping during the winter when it's wet. And they're also really useful for shade of the livestock during the summer. Every farmer wants to leave the land better than when they found it. And now what we're really looking to is what other species of plants can we be growing that might make better use of what limited moisture we do get. And that's where we've looked at things like lucerne. We're looking at introducing dung beetles. And they're very interesting because they take manure and actually put it down into the soil and incorporate it into the soil. They also open up some nice big deep channels for the moisture to get down. So they're quite an interesting animal. I think looking after soil carbon is actually about using good farming practices, and there's probably no single silver bullet. It's just doing everything as well as you can. For us, direct drilling is a big part of it. For other people, they might not do direct drilling, but they might do minimal cultivation. The idea is if you don't want to actually turn over the soil if you don't have to, let it sit there in a good state and let the bugs do their thing and let the roots get down and develop it. A lot of the practices that are good for soil carbon are basically just good agricultural practice, and having good soil carbon means that you're going to have good organic matter, which just means that everything's actually working well. We have no regrets about coming to New Zealand. It's a fantastic part of the world, and we feel really privileged to be at Castlepoint Station and be just the latest generation of many stewards of the land who've looked after it for many, many years.